Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first full episode of Peon to Parsable, where we take our little Shadow Priest Grimdisco and we try to go from being a complete Scrub Lord on a class we know nothing about to being at least half decent, where we can try eventually to gain some passes and to do some decent level keys. But we must take the first step, and that's going to be a lot of work, so this is going to be a long one. Let's get into it. So before we get into all of the changes that we need to make, I thought I'd take us into a quick time walking and we could see exactly what our UI doing full effect while we're in the middle of a dungeon. Now, we don't care about damage at this point. The thing with time walking and normal dungeons, because the levels of players vary so drastically, it's all scaled. So we don't care about damage. We're literally looking at how bad our UI is and what we need to change. Now, obviously, we've got our party frames along the bottom. That's taking up a huge chunk of real estate that really we could use for other things. We've got these tell me whens, these alerts in the middle of the screen, and they don't apply to us. We need to get rid of that. We need to update them. So there's two huge things. Our UI is not clean. It's not crisp. It's not giving us what we need, which is concise information. We've got tell me whens, weak auras that aren't giving us proper information. We've got things overlapping. It's not great. So they're the two things we're going to focus on today. We're going to change our UI up a little bit, and we are going to update our tell me whens or our weak auras. Also, little bonus thing, we gained a level. So let's put our point in, and then let's get into updating our UI. Now, obviously, I'm going to be using ELVUI to change up my UI, but I will be showing at the end of this section how you can do it if you're just using the normal Blizzard edit mode. Now, for this, we need some target dummies, so here we are in the PvP area of Dragonflight. So the first thing we're going to tackle is that party frame sat right in the middle of our bars. It's annoying the hell out of us. It's not good for us. Yes, we need to see our team's healths. We need to see their buffs, debuffs, things like that, because there may be things we can do to help, especially as a priest. Also, we've got twin sons, so you know what? Maybe we will share and give a friend PI as well. I know, shock horror. So we're going to need it. We are going to need it, but we don't want it sat horizontally. We're going to have to sit it vertically. It's going to be sat to the side. So for that, we go into LV. We go down to unit frames. We're going to go to party. From there, we select display frames because we want to be able to see this frame so we can see what it's going to look like once we've completed editing it. So there it is now on our screen. Don't worry about all the images and that. We just literally need to see the bars. Next, we need to click on growth direction. Don't laugh. You're not 5 years old. At the moment, we've got it going from right and then going down. We don't want that. Instead, we want it to grow down so that we get our bars vertically. Then we could edit these further, have them bigger, smaller, how we want to do it, and we will do that going forward in the future. But right now we've got these bars vertically, we're just going to move them over to the left-hand side of our screen. That frees up a massive chunk down the bottom. Of course, once you're done, hit display frame again so it disappears. Let's move on. And the next one is personal preference. Now we have all this free space down the bottom. I like to be able to see my own health bar, and I like to be able to see the health bar of the target. Some people don't care. Some people will use their party frames. Some people have the personal health and the target health way up in the top corner still, like it used to be in Classic. This is entirely up to you. The two that really matter to me here is more target of target. The reason being is, especially if I'm targeting a boss, a lot of the times they will look at the target that they want to do an ability on. Might be they're going to throw a meteor at you, or they're going to target you to grip you in, or wherever it may be. If you can suddenly see that change and you know it's going to go to you, or you know like a knockback's going to happen to a friend, you can grip them, whatever it may be, knowing where your target's about to look is quite handy. Also, you know that threat is still on the tank, which is also a big bonus. The other one is your focus. That's really important as well, because I want to be able to quickly, as we're going into a pull, focus a target, then attack another target, but I can still interrupt my focus. That's important for me, those two things especially. So, as I say, the health bar of myself, the health bar of my target is entirely personal preference. With that done, though, let's move on. Now, the next part is important, but it's still to do with our unit frame. It's still to do with our character. You can see at the very bottom of my priest bar, there's a purple bar. That is our resource. That's the power we're using to be able to use our big spells. So if it might be Maelstrom, might be Rage, whatever it may be, it's important to keep track of this because, one, we don't want to overcap. That's a big waste of our resources. But two, we don't want to be there spamming an ability, waiting for it to go off when we don't have the resources for it, because every GCD is going to be precious to us. So as you can see here, I'm going to use this real estate in the middle that we gain from moving our unit frames, our party frames, and that dead center is going to be the resource. In this case, it's insanity for a Shadow Priest. Now we'll start hitting the target dummies, and you can see nice and clearly, dead center, we can see our insanity slowly building. So now we know our resources, now we know when we can use our big spells, whether we've got enough power for them. And speaking of power and resources, the last thing we're going to do in this section for now, because this will be an ever-evolving thing, is the mana bar that's showing. We don't use mana, not really, as a Shadow Priest, so we don't care. We're going to get rid of that bar. What we care about is our insanity. So we're simply just going to disable our mana bar, and that, again, gives us precious real estate that we desperately need and crave in the middle of our screen. So here we are with little Grim Revy, still kicking back, relaxing, on the back of a turtle, hasn't picked Horde, hasn't picked Alliance, is just living the life. To be fair, I don't blame you. It meant you missed out on Shadowlands. So here we are, we're into the Blizzard editor now, as I said I would be, just to show you guys that you can do pretty much similar what you can do in ELVUI, just it misses a few bells and whistles. That big block there is the talking heads. Move that out of the way as quick as possible, because there's nothing worse than being in the middle of a fight and a giant talking head comes up in the middle of the screen. Also, the extra action abilities, you can actually bind that to a button in your keybinds, saves you having to press any extra action abilities at all. Handy for things like Halls of Valor with the Eye of Scovid. Now this is me just, yes, okay, I can't move my target. Thanks, Blizz, I'm going to have to go and tick the box. Ah, there we go, finally. So, that is entirely personal preference, but I do like, out of the various targeting boxes, the things I do like is having focus nearby, just so I can see what I'm focusing, so that if I want to do a kick interrupt to my focus, I know what it's going to be, and I can make sure my focus has actually been set properly. Everything else is entirely up to you. At the end of the day, the goal of this is to get a UI that works for you. It doesn't matter if somebody else says, oh, it's not nice, it's horrible, it's whatever. It doesn't matter. If it makes you play better, then that's all that matters. Now, I use a Razer Naga mouse. That's why I have my bar set up like this. It replicates my Razer Naga so that I know where my buttons are. It's a silly thing and it shouldn't need to be like that, but it's just something I've grown accustomed to. That's why I have it that way. And we're pretty much done. We are going to need to go and grab our party frames because we're going to want that close to the center. It is, after all, a team sport, a team game, and we're going to need to know what sort of state our team's in, especially when we're over on our priest, because there's a lot of things we can do to help our team out. And that's really it. I will say, work in progress. Once you've set up, you need to save, so if you mess something up and you suddenly panic, and there is a reason I said work in progress in a second, you can see my targets moved. We'll come out, click that, yeah. But yeah, if you have messed it up, don't worry, you can just not save it. It will all revert back to the way it was, and you can start again. There's no way you can break that. And there we go. That is the Blizzard UI. So for this next section, we are going to look at our weak auras, our tell me whens, our alerts, the things that show us what our spells are doing in the background, where we need to go next. The big component of this is guides. Things like Wowhead's guide, which we'll be using for this, things like Icy Veins guide on the rotation. I have no idea how to play a Shadow Priest, so that's the first place I'm going to go. And around that, we are going to build these Tell Me Whens in this case. The only reason I use Tell Me When over weak auras is because once I set my entire UI up as weak auras, and then there was an update, I lost all of it, and I've never had that with Tell Me When. It's the only reason. In fact, weak auras have an amazing help you guide to go through how to set up your very first weak auras and things like that. And weak auras is just better to probably learn, but I'm a stickler and just now I work with Tell Me When. But here we go. Each spell has a unique ID. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look up our Shadow Crash's ID and we're going to put that in this box. The reason I try to use spell IDs over spell names, Sometimes there's a lot of spells that have very similar names, or there's maybe a spell type, but the proc chance that happens, the buff debuff is different, and it's just sometimes cleaner to work with a spell ID. So we're going to put that in. As you can see, Shadow Crash is the first up on our WoW rotational guide, so that's why it's first up here. We're going to move this to 50%. That transparency on fail is basically just when our ability is used, or when it's on cooldown, apologies, not fail, it's just going to show at 50%. The timers will then show us when it's going to come back. So that is Shadow Crash set up. We don't need anything else, doesn't need to interact with anything else. Next up, Mind Mender. This actually carries over from our Disc Priest. So we are going to, again, set the transparent at 50%. Again, have the timers so we can see when our little Mind Friend is back. Now you can see here we have Psychic Scream. We also have Rapture on here. We don't want them. Obviously, Rapture we don't have. Psychic Scream we do have, but the very middle abilities are paramount. These are the prime core rotation. Things like utility, things like our defensive, something like that, we can have them on different bars. So as you can see, we've just taken our little Mind Friend and we've replaced our Psychic Scream. Next up, we're going to put in our Dark Aspiration, Ascension. I can never remember what it's called off the top of my head. But we're going to put that in right next to our Shadow Clash. So here we go. It's all set up. We're good to go. Let's see what this does. Bang! There goes the Shadow Crash. So on cooldown, for some reason, we have a gold box. That is not good. We'll have to look at that in a second. But we go Dark Aspiration. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Boom! That goes on cooldown. You see the box goes to 50% transparency. And we get the timer come up. That's brilliant. Same with our Mind Fiend. So it's all working. It's all good. But we do need to look at why that's going golden. So here we go. Let's pull up our TellMeWhens again. Let's click on our Shadow Clash. And we can see here. Damn it. We had something obviously left over from our previous. This is a notification. We will look at these in a little bit. But right now we want that gone. It's just an ability. We want to know when it's off cooldown. It doesn't have any conditions or anything like that attached to it. Boom. That should be done. One thing that does have a condition, again, looking at our Wowhead rotation guide on the corner of the screen, is PI. We want PI when we're using Dark Aspiration. So again, we're going to look up the spell ID for PI. And we are going to put this in the box. There we go. And again, we're going to go and do basically the same thing we've done before. 50% on transparency. We're going to want the timers so we know when it's up. Okay, that seems fine. But we have one extra thing we need to do, and that is to set up an alert. We want it to glow, to brightly animate itself when our condition is met. Now, there's two conditions here. One is either while the condition's being passed, so i.e. if the color turns to green, always flash while it's green, or once it turns green, just that's it, you just keep going. So one will be while it's green, I'll flash. One will be if it ever goes green, I'll just start flashing for you. So we want while this condition's set. So while we have Dark Aspiration, that's when we want our trigger to happen. So we're just going to go in here, we're going to go into our condition, we're going to go buffs and debuffs, because what we're actually looking for is the Dark Aspiration buff. We want a duration that is not equal to absent, which means we just have the buff. That's fine. Now, to work this out, we are going to go Dark Aspiration. I will say, I already know that the buff is the same ID. What you could do, if you're worried that the buff may be different, is pop the buff, go up to your buff bar, just hover over it, and again, the buff itself will give you an ID. So here we go, let's test it out. We pop Dark Aspiration, and boom! Our PI glows to tell us, hey, you're using Dark Aspiration, you probably want to use PI, don't forget about me. Unfortunately, we don't want that glow, so what we're going to quickly do is go into LV, and we're going to say, look, if the PI is not available, just don't tell us about PI. We're happy with that. That's fine. Let's move on to Mind Blast. This is an interesting one, because we will be doing a condition and a notification with this. So, again, we just set it up the same way, spell cooldown. And then we're going to want to go and enter the spell ID or the spell name. Again, I always like to use spell ID. For this one, we don't care about transparency. We don't care about timers. We care about stacks. So we could make a condition for this. We could go, ooh, let's have, it must have X, Y, and Z. We actually don't need to do that. The reason being is on the very front page, we have little baby conditions, and one of them is stacks. And we can say, we do not want this to show unless there are 2 charges available. So we just simply tick the box, we put in 2 charges, and that's it. You can see now on the bars, our Mind Blast is showing, and we have 2 charges. Handy. Let's go into combat, see what happens. So here we go, we're throwing we're throwing our Shadow Crash in. We're going to use our Mind Blast. Boom. We've now gone down to 1 charge. It no longer shows. But Mind Blast also has a little proc that it can do. So we're going to need to also account for that. Else we're going to be getting charges and we don't really know why we're getting them. Let's go back into our Mind Blast and work out what on earth is going on. Shadowy Insight is what is going on, and rather than have a condition, we actually want this to just glow bright orange when the condition that we have Shadowy Insight is going on, because we want to be able to use that bang straight away. A free like instacast Mind Blast, we want to know about that. So we're going to set this up again. We're gonna type this one in. Let's go Shadowy Insight because we haven't got the proc to hand right now. Shadowy Insight, yeah, then this is the issue. That's why I say I try to use the spell number wherever I can. But there we go, that should be it all set up. So whenever we get Shadowy Insight, or when we have 2 stacks, our notification, our Tell Me When is going to glow when we've got the Insight, and when we've got 2 stacks, it's going to show us. It will also show us if the Shadowy Insight happens to give us a 2nd stack. As you go, boom! Okay, that couldn't have happened any quicker, but there we go. So we're going to keep going through the rotation a little bit, just see if that starts glowing to show when that shows that we've got more than 1 charge and that kind of thing. Just to show our Tell Me When working as intended. Just going to do fuller stuff. There we go. So we got a 2nd charge and then we got an Insight on top of that. Now we've used all of that. We only have 1 charge. It's not going to show that it's available for us. We're going to keep waiting. We'll keep doing, boom, 2 charges. We can use that, and if we had another Insight, it would glow, but we know, there we go, another Insight. Perfect, exactly what we want. Let's move on. Okay, so one of the things we're starting to notice is we're running out of room. Eventually we're going to have a Tell Me When bar that's going to be as long as our screen. That's not great. It's meant to be concise information right there in a small box so we can see it easily. So what we're going to do is actually we're going to expand this out a little bit, but more importantly we're then going to give it another stack on top. This way we can have things like when Dark Aspiration goes off, it's then going to show PI above it rather than having it next to it, which just means, again, we can have a smaller little unit there in the middle of our screen. Again, I always like, this is going to be a strange one, but it's a personal preference, an odd number so that the core ability can be very dead center and then the others sort of fan out from that. Whichever spells you want where, that's entirely up to you. Again, it's what works best for you. Now, the next spell we're going to look at, which is going to work very much like PI, it's going to be based off of another ability or of a proc, is going to be Shadow Word Death. Now, as we can see from our Wowhead article, we need to look at that when our Mindbender Fiend is doing his thing. So, we're going to put in Shadow Word Death into this. There we go. Select that. And then we're going to have to set up a condition or something that tells us basically, hey, your Shadow Fiend is running around doing his thing, so maybe think about putting Shadow Word Death on it. So, we go to conditions, we create a new one, we're going to drop down this list, and then we are going to have a look to see where exactly our Shadow Fiend's going to be. And that's going to be difficult, because there isn't an option for pets, or... okay. Yeah, this is a little bit of a hang-up, I don't know what you want to call it, but you will see in this bottom corner here, totems. Let me just drag it out of the way so you can see it, there we go. Totems. Yeah, but I'm not a shaman. But actually, a lot of things that you summon, like pets and that, are actually considered totems. That's what they come under. Don't ask me why, but if you're ever a Demonology Warlock, you will see loads of those bars fill up as you summon more and more pets. Your Demonic Tyrant and all that will all appear on a totem bar. There you go. There's our little fiend on the totem bar. Okay, now we can work with that because there is actually an option within our TellMeWhens for things that interact with totems. This is good. So we're going to go back in. We're going to go conditions again. And we're going to drop this down. And now we are going to look for, this time, totems. Let's go way down. Now, I always pick all totems just in case. I will say if you're a class that has a lot of, like, Demonology Warlock totems, this is going to proc on any of those, okay? So just be warned on that. But yeah, for us, that should be fine. We're going to basically say as long as it's not absent, as long as something is in our totem bar, then we want you to do this. Or what we want to do is if the target's health. So here we go. We're going to go health percentage because we know it's if it's below 20%. We do not want ourselves. We don't want to target ourselves. We clear this bar. It shows you a whole list of things you can select. And one of those is our target. So if our target is equal to or less than 20% health, there we go. So if our Mind Fiend is out, it's going to tell us, hey, you want to be using Touch of Death? Touch of Death? It's been a long day, forgive me. You want to use Shadow Word Death, or if the target is below 20% health. Now there is one more thing we need to look at, and that is we have a lot of builders. We have a lot of things that are going to build our insanity, but we are going to need to track a spender. Now we have some options on spenders, but what we're going to look at is Devouring Plague. Right now we're just focused on single target. We'll start to add in more of the AoE stuff. We need to get our core rotation down to understand it, and then we can start expanding that out. So, let's look at our spender. Now, this is going to have a very simple rudimentary condition, because these things are very much... This is where our real skill is going to develop. But right now, we just need to be told, hey, look, you do not have Devouring Plague on the target. You've got enough insanity to spend to get a Devouring Plague. Maybe think about using it. So here we're going to look for resources, and we're going to look for insanity. Now this spell, as I say, is far more nuanced than we're making it very simple here. But this is just to remind us to use it. There are things like with Devouring Plague, you want to try and keep the stacks rolling, applying the extra damage from the previous one. There's all sorts of stuff. I've been reading up on it. It's mad. We're going to get there. This right now is just, hey, look, use Devouring Plague, and you've got it available again. Just keep using it. Don't waste and overcap your insanity. So we've got this basic set up for us so that we can at least remember to use it. Because that's the level we're at right now. Let's not try and go crazy. And with that done, what we can now do is just add in the last couple of spells that are on this list. The main one probably being Mind Games. We want to add that in. We've got everything there then, and we're all done and dusted. This is just a basic, tell us when it's available. Again, 50% transparency when it's not available, so that we can see the timers, so we know when it's going to come back up. Nice and simple. We've done that one a million times before. And that's it. We're good to go. So let's start firing off some spells and see what happens. So there we go. There's our Shadow in. It's now telling us that we should use PI. We've got our Dark Aspiration. Devouring Plague was coming up. Our Mind Blasters available. Ooh, there we go. We're using our Death. Using more Mind Blasts. We're going to do a filler, which we always know is available. It doesn't need to be on the bar. We know our filler is always there when we click it. Another Mind Blast procs come up. We've got Devouring Plague available. We've still got Mind Blast if we want it. There's Mind Blast gone. We're going to Mind Blast because we're filling, because nothing's lighting up to tell us. And already it feels like we're kind of getting a bit better at understanding it. And part of that comes from actually setting this up ourselves. I understand more about this rotation from just obviously reading the rotation guide, but also then setting it up myself. If I just imported a set of weak auras that did this for me, that just showed me all my abilities, I wouldn't understand the interaction and how things can work with the other parts of my spec. But with those core abilities done, that's sorted. We're going to go into a dungeon soon, see if we can put them to the test. There is two other things that I just want to quickly set up. They are my utility. They are the spells that are going to help me that are just useful. Okay, one of them, first one, being Angelic Feather. I always like movement abilities on my left-hand side, so I can just quickly see them, that they're available, so I can move around quicker. I play a Blood DK. Being able to move around at least semi-fast is a nice thing to be able to do. So again, we're going to look at the Angelic Feather spell ID. We're going to click on our little icon. And then we are going to add in a new... There we go, down there. Eventually. I'll get there in the end, okay? I'm old. It takes me time. So there we go. We're going to add in, again, our spell ID for the feather. Click on that. And then, again, we're going to have this. We want the transparency. We want 50%. We want to see the timer so we know when we're going to get Angelic Feather back as fast as possible, please. Also, we want it to show outside of combat. That's the difference between our two bars. So our spell bar, our spell group, is only going to show when we are in combat. That means we don't have all those buttons, all those abilities showing when we're out of combat, but our Angelic Feather will still show. Because we're going to be running around the world, we want to be able to know when we can move. There is one more thing we're going to do, and that is to dispel magic. Now, I've put this down on the combat bar because, to be fair, we're only really going to want to use this when we are in combat. We're then going to select buff, debuff, and we actually want to not... It's nothing to do with us, it's about our target. So we select our target, and we care about buffs, not debuffs. Debuffs are going to be put on the target by us. We care about how they're buffing themselves. We then leave the spell completely blank. We leave it completely blank because it can be anything. All we want to do is then tick the box that says, make sure this is dispellable. I have as a little bit of flavor added in for the icon ID our magical dispel. Now, there's nothing I can test this on, so what we're going to need to do is dive into a dungeon. So here we are in Shadowmoon Burial Ground. No, I haven't suddenly done 70 and I'm doing Mythic Plus. This happened to be Time Walking, Warlord's Drenor. So Shadowmoon Burial Ground was also on the list. Now, we're looking a lot cleaner. Our UI is looking a lot better. We've got a nice big usable space in the middle. We can see our party frames, see all of our friends and what they're doing. We can see our insanity, and we have all of our alerts showing us the things we need to do. There are, no doubt, some things we still need to change, some things we still need to look at. But overall, much better so far. Now, one of the big things we need to look at is the fact that it appears we have an overlap of two add-ons that basically do the same thing. We have Bigwigs, and we also have DBM. That's not great. Conflicting information, conflicting things going on. We don't need both of them. It's using up memory that we don't need to waste, and so on and so forth. But let's have a look at our first boss. We've got all of our alerts going off, telling us various things. We feel far more in control. Granted, we're being absolutely destroyed on the DPS by two big boys, but such is life. And I will say, it is Time Walking. As I said at the very beginning, damage does not matter right now. It's about our comfort as a player with our UI, our surroundings, and knowing what's going on. Into the second boss. And yeah, they're still smashing it, but we are above the tank and healer, and that's what I care about right now. Now, yes, we need to get our DBM's Bigwigs issue sorted. We also need to look at our AoE rotation because it is lacking. We don't know when we're meant to be using Mindseer because we didn't set that up. That's fine. We're based on a single target rotation right now. We're trying to learn the core of our class, and we'll need to start adding those things in. Also, maybe some new macros, i.e. we can mouse over somebody else for PI, because I imagine it's going to be a pain. I don't think we've used it yet, but when we're going to use PI, we're going to need to actually click on somebody and cast PI on them. Not good, because we want to stay focused on our primary target and keep doing damage. We also probably want something that's going to track stand buffs so that we can make sure our party has it maintained at all times. If somebody dies and they're combat resed, or they just die and release, they're going to lose that stand buff. We want to make sure our party is in tip-top health all the way through so we deplete less keys. Now, I've left all this in because something funny, interesting, I don't know, it was weird. I've never had it happen before. Happened to me on this boss. Also, I can rise up, keep rising up the DPS. We're second. Can we beat the warrior? Can we stay above the shaman? Well, we beat the shaman, but we didn't beat the warrior. Yeah, everybody's holding their cooldowns for the boss. That's fine. We're not going to top the boss in this one. But here we go. So this one, if you don't know, inhales you. It's going to pull us in fine, whatever it may be. So I go and stand in the grippy hands, inhales, whatever. We're second on the damage, whoop, we're doing okay, but it's not a great fight for the poor shaman. But here's the weird thing, so the pool starts to fill up, we're going to get knocked off, we're going to goblin jump, and now we're outside of the arena, but we're going to keep fighting. We even have our own grippy hands if we wanted it. I've never had that before, pure fluke. I rocket jumped and just landed on that platform. I may try it again when we do a mythic at some point. I'm not sure it's going to work out that well. But here we are, last boss, almost done. Yeah, we've got a few bits to go, but we're heading in the right direction. We also dinged another level, so we are 62. This is going to be a point in our utility side. We'll focus on that in the next video. Sorry this was a long one. Thank you for sticking with me all the way to this point, if you did. And I'll catch you all in the next video. Ladies, everyone. Have a good one.